Right, let's sort the buyers from the spires, the needy from the greedy, and those who trust me from the ones who don't. Because if you can't see value here today, you're not up here shopping, you're up here shoplifting. You see these goods, never seen daylight, moonlight, Israelites, fanny by the gaslight. Take a bag, come on, take a bag. I took a bag home last night, it cost me a lot more than £10, I can tell you. Anyone like jewellery? Look at that one there. Handmade in Italy, hand stolen in Stepney. It's as long as my arm, I wish it was as long as something else. Don't think because these boxes are sealed up, they're empty. The only man who sells empty boxes is the Undertaker. And by the look of some of you lot here today, I'd make more money with me measuring tape. Here, one price, £10.
Guy Ritchie is a British film director, producer, and scriptwriter, most known for his British gangster films, which he mostly directed and wrote, and the Sherlock Holmes films, which he just directed. He's most known for his interesting characters, witty dialogue, and action. Ritchie was born September 10, 1968 in Hatfield, United Kingdom to Amberny Parkinson and Captain John Ritchie. He has dyslexia, and so he struggled a lot with schoolwork and eventually became a troublemaker. Though bullied as a young kid, he quickly turned that around and became the one beating others up. For his shenanigans, he attended 10 different schools and was expelled from a top private school at age 15. He claimed it was due to drug use. He gave up on school after that final expulsion. Instead, he set his eyes towards film. He loved stories, with some of his favorites being Sherlock Holmes. In fact, he knew he wanted to be a filmmaker from a young age, after watching Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, aspects of which can be seen to influence his future films. Ritchie chose not to go to film school, as he thought the work of film school graduates was boring and unwatchable. Instead, he started as a runner, and then started making commercials and music videos, both of which require a very different style from traditional filmmaking. His early film career and what he learned from it would have a substantial impact on his future works. After creating a short film, The Hard Case, Ritchie met Matthew Vaughn, who produced his first film, Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, which was based off of his short. The movie became very popular and did very well. In fact, Brad Pitt wanted to work with Ritchie on a film. Ritchie didn't pass on the offer, and his second film, Snatch, included a much higher budget and a much better cast, Pitt included. Snatch did great as well. However, his popularity started to die down with some of his later films, and he switched from British gangster movies to working as a director for hire, making films which were popular and earned him a lot of money, but weren't true Guy Ritchie films. He finally came back to the British gangster scene with his film The Gentleman, which he wrote and directed. Now, before getting into the films, I wanted to show you some of Ritchie's core philosophies.
I think if you lose your temper once, you're likely to lose it twice. But I'd rather enjoy my day, so I make a conscious effort to have a positive mental attitude. And then that picks up momentum, you know? And then you just got to set a tone, and then you stick to that tone.
Why be subservient? You must be the master of your own kingdom. You have to take possession of your life.
Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, Ritchie's first film, tells the story of 4 friends trying to get rich quick by betting a ton of money into poker. As mentioned before, this resembles the plot of his short film, The Hard Case. In the film, though their attempt does seem pretty likely, they're tricked and lose all the money, forced into debt to a very dangerous man with no way to pay it back. They must come up with some way to get the money back, and they decide to be involved in a robbery of a marijuana farm, and the rest of the movie is about what happens with that. As you'll see with the rest of his films, the movie consists of many unique characters, and their stories all overlap by the ending. In addition, the color palette is similar to the western he first watched and loved, Butch Cassidy. Not only did the film launch Guy Ritchie's name out there, but many of the main actors as well, with the biggest example being Jason Statham, who we can see working with Guy Ritchie in many films in the future. This film is the first look into Guy Ritchie's style, and is the most comedic out of all of them, especially due to the fact that it was really just some people having fun together. They haven't really gotten much funding or much of a sense as what they were doing, but just wanted to have fun and make a movie that they'd enjoy.
You got a toothbrush? We're going to London. Do you hear that, Doug? I'm coming to London! me. Shut up and sit down, you big bald
Snatch, Ritchie's second film, consists of a much bigger budget and a much better cast. Like Lock, Stock, it consists of many unique characters and how all of their stories come together in the end. However, Ritchie expands on this style much more in this film, with many more unique characters whose storylines remain more independent till the ending. Though this makes the film's ending much more dramatic and makes the film more interesting as a whole, it does make it much harder to explain what is really going on without having seen the film. However, I'll try my best. At its core, Snatch has two main stories, which have even more sub-stories within them. The first is of a diamond theft, and how the thief, played by Benicio del Toro, is trying to sell the diamond in Britain. However, when news of his arrival in Britain is heard, many people want to try and get the diamond from him. The second story is about illegal boxing matches. One of the promoters, played by Jason Statham, who works for a big gangster who runs these fights, loses his fighter, and so he must find another one. With his life on the line to find a boxer who will throw in the fourth, he chooses a gypsy leader, played by Brad Pitt, who is a very skilled boxer, but not someone who follows rules too well. How do these stories connect? It just so happens that the thief is addicted to gambling and wants to bet on the fight. Though sticking with his comedic style, Ritchie makes Snatch much darker than his previous film, with bad guys who are much more dangerous than before and much more bloody violence. Though the story is more complex, Ritchie manages it perfectly and creates an enjoyable film that is a huge improvement on his last.
If you wish to be the king of the jungle, it's not enough to act like a king. You must be the king. There can be no doubt, because doubt causes chaos and one's own demise.
After an absence of about 10 years, The Gentleman marks Ritchie's return to the British gangster genre. Once again, it reflects Ritchie's signature style and premises. However, rather than focus on small-time gangsters, he decides to explore the world of posh, upper-class gangsters, whose operations are on a much larger scale and function more like a mafia. The Gentleman tells the story of an American, played by Matthew McConaughey, who built a marijuana empire in the UK and is trying to sell it. The story follows how people are trying to trick him to steal his property, and the alliances, shady deals, and schemes that come up along the way. The story is told through the eyes of a private detective, and the screenplay he is writing, as he asks McConaughey's right-hand man, played by Charlie Hunnam, questions about details he is missing. Thus, the audience is learning more and more about the story alongside the detective, and this style of narrating keeps the audience guessing and emphasizes plot twists as they arise. In addition, since the detective doesn't know much about upper-class gangsters at the start, it makes it so that the audience enters the world alongside him and learns how these poshly clad businessmen are not as nice as they might appear. The marijuana farm aspect of this film ties back to Ritchie's first, where the main characters are trying to rob a marijuana farm. In addition, it relates to his own experience with drug use and how that has influenced him. Also, Ritchie switching to upper-class gangsters reflects his own progression. As a kid, he was more akin to the petty gangster seen in his first films. However, as he became more experienced and powerful himself, he switched sides to gangsters who were more experienced and powerful as well. Furthermore, The Gentleman really shows Ritchie's progression as a filmmaker. Not only does the film look better, but it also plays with emotions much more. Ritchie's previous films were mostly comedic, getting a little more serious and dark with Snatch. In Gentleman, Ritchie explores the world of upper-class gangsters and shows how dangerous these nonchalant and posh people really were. The film is much darker and serious. These aspects are best seen through his use of quick changes in tone, going from calm to chaotic very quickly, which McConaughey does a phenomenal job at showcasing. For example,
As stated, I am not emotional about the money. But I am emotional about the fact that someone laid their hands on my wife. My wife! No amount of money on God's green earth can pay for that transgression, Matthew. No, for that.
The Gentleman's success led to the creation of a show of the same name and set in the same universe. Though Ritchie only directs the first 2 episodes, the show still shows many influences from Ritchie's childhood. For example, the setting on a baron's manor reflects his own childhood growing up on a manor. In addition, he ties it back to his previous films as well. For example, in addition to the marijuana farms, Two major aspects of the series are gypsies and boxing, playing homage to Snatch. Ritchie's films are known for their fast-paced editing and fun manner of visual storytelling. His style really shows aspects of his origins making music videos. In fact, he includes a mini music video in The Gentleman, which we can only assume is to pay homage to his beginnings as a filmmaker.
Boxes of bush, all buds, no dust. Boxes and boxes and boxes with the toddlers of your tongue.
Ritchie also plays around a lot with editing of time during his films, such as slow-mos and time ramping, especially during action sequences. Not only are these just fun to work with and make the scenes look much cooler, he uses it to change the pacing of tension and, in combination with the increased amount of detail the audience sees, makes certain sections more dramatic and emotional. Matching his fun film style, Ritchie loves to mess around with camera angles. His favorite type is definitely the low angle, which again makes the film look cooler, but also makes the characters in the shot look larger than life. This makes his characters look much more powerful and dangerous, increasing a sense of fear in the audience. However, he sometimes pairs such a low-angle shot with the characters not acting very intimidating, even joking around at times. Thus, through use of juxtaposition, Guy Ritchie emphasizes the dark comedy style that he is known for, a sort of comedy which probably stems from Ritchie's childhood, where his having fun came from beating up others. This aspect of his style is seen in a scene from The Gentleman.
His name was Fahak, but spelled with a PH, so it sounds like Fahak.
So it's Fahak.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, anyway, he's the kid that gave us the skunk farm job. Do you know him?
Yeah, we've met before, haven't we, Fahak? Fuck.
That's the one.
Fahak? Fahak.
Fahak. Alright. Don't do anything stupid now, son, right?
Ritchie's work also comes with many times when the tension quickly ramps up, such as going from a simple conversation to a full-blown gunfight in just a matter of seconds. This suddenly makes aspects of his films much more interesting, and keeps the audience hooked with action after a more dull scene. It is also another example of Ritchie's use of juxtaposition. In The Gentleman, Ritchie combines this aspect with his use of angles to show how a sense of equal ground quickly changes to one where one person is heavily overpowered.
And this? Oh, this is a big gun.
Eyes not so dry now, are they? Hurts, does it? You looking for your balls or a hole in the wall? Where the do you think you're going? Because you're not going out the way you came in, you deluded duck-eating. Talking to me about the laws of the jungle. What was it? Something about being beneath me, silver on back? There's only one rule in this f***ing jungle. When the lion's hungry, he eats.
Another commonality found in Ritchie's work is the presence of games, like cards and chess. Cards show up in Lock, Stock, and Snatch, and are commonly paired with gambling. Ritchie probably uses these games as metaphors for the characters, and how their sense of control isn't really there, and instead it's all up to chance. This makes sense, as in Lock, Stock, the characters decide to gamble a lot of money, believing they are sure to win, but that all comes crashing down on them. Though chess doesn't come up in the films I am discussing, it is common in his other films, such as Rock'n'Rolla and Sherlock Holmes. Ritchie probably uses chess to show the intellectual battle between characters as they match wits, such as Holmes's match against Moriarty in Sherlock Holmes: A Game of Shadows. Ritchie also loves using chase scenes. Not only are they fun to watch, make, and keep the audience entertained, which are his primary goals, but they also emphasize the game of cat and mouse that many characters are playing in his films. In addition, as mentioned before, his films jump around from one storyline to another, always coming together in the end. This allows for Ritchie to have fun with multiple different stories in the same film, and results in a very fun and enjoyable ending, especially when it all comes together nicely. It also allows for him to explore many different types of characters as well, allowing him to have much more fun with the creation of the film, and include funny moments stemming from very different characters interacting with each other. Since the way he implements this method of storytelling changes each film as well, it shows him having fun with new ideas and trying new things. Many of these characters have different aspects of British culture associated with them. Ritchie explores these parts of his British heritage through the characters he creates, and their contrasting accents, costume styles, and ways of life are what he uses to showcase them. Throughout his films, he covers characters ranging from gypsies to low-level gangsters to the aristocracy and businessmen. A more obvious aspect of his films is crime. Many of Ritchie's films revolve around crime, which makes sense as they're gangster films. However, rather than portray his characters as good people fighting the bad criminals, he makes everyone a criminal. The main distinction Ritchie plays with is how bad a character is. Thus, he makes his protagonists anti-heroes, people who are still bad, just not as bad as the bad guys. This most probably comes from his own past as a delinquent, which caused him to think of other troublemakers as not as bad. However, I don't think he thinks all good of young troublemakers. Another commonality across his films is his focus on how experience changes how someone acts. Many of his younger characters act more rashly and are smug, whereas older and more experienced characters don't go for flair, but are much more scary and dangerous. In some scenarios, the rashness doesn't have negative consequences, with challenges just being solved for the characters. However, in The Gentleman, where younger people are not the main characters, Ritchie is not afraid to pull punches and shows more of the negative consequences of such smugness.
Right! Now!
Moving away from the darker aspects of Ritchie's films, let's talk about the fun parts. Ritchie's films always contain comedy, and though they may cover more serious and dark topics, the audience will always enjoy a laugh while watching his movies. One of the biggest ways he does this, and one of the ways he's best known for, is through witty dialogue and clever wordplay.
I know you couldn't have known my position, because you're not that stupid that if you did, you wouldn't have turned up here scratching your ass with that "what's going on here" look slapped all over your Chevy Chase.
Blimey, coach, you're a gypsy too. Been reading tea leaves, got a crystal ball.
In addition, Guy Ritchie, consistent with his philosophies, tries to make the filmmaking process as fun as possible.
So when I was writing, I'd never think about, what music's going to go with what. And afterwards, I'd go to my Rolodex of favourite pub tunes from jukeboxes and go, oh, let's try this, let's try that, and then, that could dictate the tonality of the scene simply because these were tunes that sort of meant a lot to me.
Music isn't the only way Guy Ritchie has fun while filming, however. He also loves to mess around on set.
I found the most efficient way of making sure things got done was to find people. It was a humorous kind of idea and keep the sort of a jolly spirit to keeping everyone motivated and focused. But in the end, the finding system just turned into it was a hoax and a reason to have a laugh.
In addition, he loves to do cool stunts because they're fun to film and look cool in the movie. One of his favorites is getting people run over. Overall, Guy Ritchie is a filmmaker that loves to take control and do whatever he wants with the films, and loves having fun in the process, all of which is very consistent with his philosophies. It's also shown from the way he creates his films, from editing style to witty dialogue. However, just because he's having fun doesn't mean the films are all sunshine and rainbows. Ritchie covers many dark topics, and his films are generally quite violent. He doesn't like to pull punches and loves the juxtaposition that comes from dark comedy. In addition, he takes a lot of influence from his past, both from his time as a kid and through paying homage to his earlier career. Some of the first things I noticed about the films was just how much fun they were. Just as Guy Ritchie enjoyed making the films, I loved watching them. In addition, since his work is mostly in the action comedy genre, one of my favorites, it only increased my enjoyment. I also love learning about the different aspects of British culture through his films, especially things I didn't know about before. I think there's a lot to learn from Guy Ritchie, but the most important comes from his core philosophies. I want to incorporate his belief of doing whatever you want with your films and really having fun with them into my own process, and continue exploring wacky techniques, characters, and plots just like he does. I also really like his fast-paced editing style with quick cuts, which I want to try out in my own films as well.